Hey folks, I'm Mark Ryan. This is Super Review, and today we're going to take a quick look at the Juzear 61T. So this is a hybrid IEM coming in at around 220 bucks, and it's kind of the latest flavor of the month, or maybe more accurately, it's the flavor of the month from a couple of months ago. But this is an interesting follow-up to an IEM that I reviewed last year that I actually really liked. I really liked the 41T. So the name dictates the number of drivers. The 41T was a 4BA, 1 dynamic driver. Here with the 61T, 6 balanced armatures, 1 dynamic driver. Now, I'll say up front right now, the tuning is quite different on this one versus the 41T. So if you were a fan of the 41T, this might not necessarily be for you, but as some hype has kind of indicated, maybe this is the IEM for you. But I don't know. Let's talk about it. So we're going to make this one quick. Here's what you get inside the box. Here's the packaging of the Juzear 61T. It's called the Butterfly. You get a nice little carry case. Actually, a pretty good size. I dig it. Just hard enough that it'll protect it, but also not too large and bulky. Of course, you get a selection of ear tips, but I'll be honest, I didn't actually use these. Even though there are actually pretty good ear tips, they seem like they are spin fit clones of a sort. Maybe they're actually spin fits, but they don't quite feel like it. I think these are a spin fit clone, but still actually pretty good ear tips. I would keep them around, maybe use them for another IEM. But for me on this particular IEM, they didn't quite work out. So let's talk about the physical form factor, and we'll get into talking about why those ear tips didn't quite work out. But we'll start with the cable, which I actually really like. This is in fact the same cable that came on the 41T. And I dig it. It's a little bit on the heavyweight side. It is maybe a little bit loose in the braid, I suppose, but overall, I like the behavior on it. It feels nice, it rotary wraps nicely, and I think it looks pretty nice too. Yeah, I don't know, generally a pretty good cable. You do also have a functional chin cinch, which is something I certainly appreciate. And then of course up here, you've got your preformed ear hooks with your standard 2-pin connector. So if you want to swap this out with another cable, you certainly can, but hopefully you don't need to. Yeah, just to give you an idea of how much I like this cable, when I reviewed the 41T last year, which again came with this same cable, I actually went out and bought another version, another copy of this cable, because they sell it on AliExpress. Yeah, and I think it's a pretty nice little cable. But that will bring us into talking about these earpieces. And this is where my appreciation for the build quality is going to go down a little bit. I guess it's not so much a quality issue, it's just decisions. All right, aesthetically, I think this is kind of an ugly IEM personally. Now, obviously, that will come down to your personal preference. You know, it does have this abalone design, which maybe I'm being a little bit of a hypocrite because I really like the abalone on my 7th Acoustic Supernova, but I think it's just kind of like a big slab of it, and it's covered up with this butterfly motif that I don't really think was executed particularly well. It just feels very, very old and very, I don't know, very grandmother, I suppose. And if you're a grandmother and you like IEMs, I apologize. I'm not trying to offend, but it's not my style. Let's just say that. The other thing that I'm not a really big fan of in terms of the form factor on this IEM is just, there's something about the shape of this and the fit of this. Let me take this ear tip off real quick so you can kind of get a sense. It fits a little bit on the deep side, and the IEM itself is just kind of bulky. And even though it does have a little bit of custom molding here, it doesn't really conform to the inside of my ear. So instead what I get is just, I get kind of the sense that I'm putting a large chunk of IEM in my ear. Kind of reminds me of like the Dunu Da Vinci, which I recently reviewed. What's worse about this one, however, is the way that it seals. I initially thought that it was like creating an air seal or something inside my ear. I didn't even check. Maybe this thing doesn't have any front venting, and maybe that is what the issue was. But that was actually why I'm not using the spin fit clone ear tips that it came with. As decent tips as they are, I just found that it made this IEM fit a little bit deeper, and because of that, it was exacerbating that seal issue that I got. So here I'm using a shallower ear tip. That's working better for my ear, and I'm not getting the same like pressure buildup issues that I was having initially. That said, it's still not the best fitting IEM. Here, let me give you a little bit of a fit demonstration before we talk about the sound. And yeah, I'll just kind of show you what it looks like in my ear. Size-wise, I would say it's medium, maybe even medium-large. It's a little on the chonky side, but not especially large. And fit stability is okay once it gets in there, but again, it's not super custom molded, so it's not locking into my ear quite as well or quite as solidly as, let's say, something like a Thea Audio IEM, which is kind of my benchmark for the best fit. But yeah, I don't know. It's all right. It fits a little bit chunky. But that said, let's talk about the sound quality here on this IEM. And to do that, of course, let's start by heading over to my good friend Squiglink. You might notice I've got the thing with me now. We can talk about squigs and point at things at the same time. All right, so this is the frequency response of the Juzear 61T. If you want to check this out, I've got it on Squiglink right now, linked in the description down below, but let's just talk about it. So basically, this actually gives you a pretty good idea of what to expect with this sound, which is a kind of bassy V-shaped sound signature. And that is distinctly different from what we got with the 41T. The 41T I would describe as kind of a mid-rangey, neutral, slightly low contrast sound. That is not what we get here. Instead, we get gobs of bass down here. You can see versus my target, which is the thicker dotted line, and even versus the Harman target, which is the thinner dotted line, there is a lot more bass here on the 61T. Now, if you're into bass, that could be a good thing. For me, that's a little bit too much bass for me, but I digress. Let's move over here. The top end, I would actually say, is tuned pretty well. It does come across a little bit on the sharp side, and maybe even a little bit on the hi-fi side, right? I think that's probably why people like this IEM, is that the way that they've done the tuning with the 6-balance armatures is giving it a nice sense of, I guess, resolution and definition and again, that sharpness, that detail, I suppose. But it does come across a little bit on the sharp side, especially when I first started listening to this thing and I mentioned it wasn't quite fitting, well, those stock ear tips are fitting a little bit too deep. I was getting a little bit of sibilance kind of in this region, but with these shallower ear tips, I was getting it a little bit closer to my ear, and I think it solved that up a little bit. But still, again, it's a little bit on the edgy side. And then the biggest problem that I have with it, honestly, is the bass here, which, again, if you like a lot of bass, maybe this is a good thing. But for me, it's just the way that it is tuned in the contour here. It comes across a little bit bloaty, a little bit smeary, and frankly, just a little bit too dominant. It's not the best bass. It's fine bass, I suppose, but at 220 bucks, there's definitely better bass out there, in my humble opinion. So that's kind of the gist of what you get with the frequency response. And maybe I kind of just spoiled all my own subjective impressions as well. Let me check my notes and see if there's anything else I wanted to say. I mean, yeah, fairly generic V-shaped sound. The top end is not bad. It's well tuned. It's articulate. That's a good word. I wrote that down. Good job, me. The bass, yeah, it really is just kind of overpowering. I'm thinking like specifically Cigarettes After Sex. They have these really deep bass lines in a lot of their music, and it just comes across just like kind of droning, to be honest, and not a big fan of it. Just not super, it's a little bit on the slow side, I suppose, if that term helps you out. If you are still interested in a bassy hybrid IEM in around this price range, there are a couple of other options I would personally steer you toward. At around 200 bucks, there is the binary Crossgiz Audio Chopin. I think that thing sounds fantastic, and it's got gobs of bass, but it's much better isolated, and it doesn't have any of that droning characteristic. You still get that nice fun thump, but it's just, I think, the better tuned IEM versus the Juzear that we have here on the table. Another alternative to consider would be actually quite a bit cheaper, 120 bucks, I believe, for the Afu Explorer. That one, tuning is quite different, but actually it comes across really, it's like really very tasteful. It's a little bit on the warmer side, I suppose, but not nearly as thick and bloaty as what you get on this guy, on the Juzear. So that would be my vote. Yeah, I don't know. There's not much more for me to say about the 61T. It's a decent little IEM. I kind of get why this was a bit of a flavor of the month for a short bit, but that is kind of the nature of the flavor of the month, is that you're probably not hearing too much about this IEM anymore. And that's not super shocking to me. It's an okay IEM. Out of 5 stars, I'm gonna give the 61T 3 stars. Again, a decent little IEM at 220 bucks, but I think you can do better. But if you wanna check out the Juzear 61T, like always, I've got the description. I've got the link in the description down below. I've got the description in the link down below is maybe what I was about to say, but that doesn't make any sense. Anyway, while you're down there, if you haven't already, please do hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, ding the YouTube bell, and I'll catch you on the next super video. Cheers.
Joined with the force of reviews, we now have the tools to brave the misleading world of audio fools. Hey, this review is super, and so are you. Grab your headphones, sniff a graph, and share your thoughts in this pursuit.